Hello and welcome to the Yggdrasil podcast. I am your host, Rita Tosker. Today I have with me Limcube. We've had him as a guest in the podcast before. He is predominantly, I believe, a Zelda YouTuber. At least he was the last time I had him. But we're also going to talk about Elden Ring and Nightreign and a bunch of other topics while I have him here. I think, if we get to them, I'm not sure exactly how everything's going to go. Welcome to the podcast, Limcube. It's nice to have you back.
Hi, it's nice to be back again.
How has you been in this long interim?
I've been pretty well. I feel like I've been taking a little bit of a creative break, but this is great timing because I'm currently kind of getting back into things, not only with the Nightreign network test that just happened, but obviously also with the Switch 2 announcement slowly starting and the potential of a Zelda game being there in the future. And even, believe it or not, some Tears of the Kingdom stuff. I've kind of found some joy in it again recently, especially when it comes to the speedrunning side. And I've been working on like a big speedrun idea that I've been doing. But because of the disappointment that came with Tears of the Kingdom, it's funny because we had this weird podcast the last time where we were kind of gushing about Tears of the Kingdom, but it was this weird period where everyone was like still kind of liking the game, but there were these like concerns and we were kind of careful about mentioning them because we didn't want to seem too negative. But I feel like 3 months later, if you type Tears of the Kingdom into YouTube, it just shows you like 17 hate videos essentially of the game. Like the first one that will come up is probably going to be like the I hate Tears of the Kingdom one.
The one
so that's
from
kind of how. Yeah, exactly. I talked to them a bunch as well on Discord and stuff, and we kind of shared our frustrations.
I love that video. I reacted to that video. It was so fun. I think out of all of the Tears of the Kingdom hate videos, that one's just straight up the best. I've never laughed so hard.
Yeah, it's definitely very good, and you can tell that they also were really passionate about Breath of the Wild. So it's not just like somebody jumping on the hate train; it's somebody who passionately hates the game.
I keep mentioning this, but like it really is telling that the most passionate Tears of the Kingdom haters aren't coming from the classic Zelda fans that are. This isn't just the classic Zelda fans jumping on an opportunity and being like, aha, finally, now the tides has turned. People started hating new Zelda. No, it's specifically the Breath of the Wild people that are the most upset about the direction that Tears of the Kingdom ended up going. So you can't lay this at the feet of the old fans. You can't blame me.
No.
You can't do that. Because you look at the people that are complaining, and a lot of the times you see it's people that started with or enjoyed Breath of the Wild more.
Yeah, definitely not. And I feel like, especially coming from a speedrunner's perspective, pretty much everyone who's speedrunning Tears of the Kingdom right now is a Tears of the Kingdom guy. Like, they were not around during the Breath of the Wild times. A great example is Player 5, who's been like the most dominant force in Breath of the Wild speedrunning, has like every single leaderboard record. Tried Tears of the Kingdom for a little bit, obviously was really good at it because the games are like fundamentally somewhat similar. Got the world records and everything, but after like 3 months, probably had the exact same thing happen that happened to me, where there just wasn't enough there gameplay wise, or like that was rewarding enough to keep going, and just went back to his comfort and is doing Breath of the Wild again now. But that's essentially what happened to me as well. There just wasn't enough there. I realized that since my channel has been so heavily focused on, with some Elden Ring exceptions, so heavily focused on Breath of the Wild, that if I wanted to do that as my main gig, I would have to do Tears of the Kingdom, a game that I'm not super sold on. So I decided to take somewhat of a creative break. I am currently, unironically, enjoying Tears of the Kingdom from a gameplay/speedrunning perspective. One thing that makes that game and Breath of the Wild, but actually Tears of the Kingdom maybe even more so interesting, is coming from like a routing perspective, where you try to take the most optimal routes. That's that one time where the unlimited freedom is actually a positive point, because you can figure out which little sky island do I want to jump to first to get like this Zonai device. And from this perspective, where it is basically just like this open playground, it is enjoyable. But my problems with the lore and the writing and the game design in many ways fundamentally definitely still stand.
It's actually really interesting because, so would you say that this is typical? So when Breath of the Wild came out and you were speedrunning that, you pretty much sped ran that and made content for that, or remained passionate for that pretty much until Tears of the Kingdom came out, if I'm remembering correctly. So that whole 6 years, you were still ready to go. Whereas in Tears of the Kingdom, you're saying that not only did it drop off really quickly, you noticed it for other speedrunners of the same type, that even for them, they couldn't maintain the passionate feelings that you had for Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, I don't want to like offend any Tears of the Kingdom speedrunners, but I think if you asked the broad audience, it's just because Breath of the Wild is by far the better speed game. One huge issue that immediately crushes every single Tears of the Kingdom speedrunning content idea is that a lot of the big like tricks, like the duplication and stuff, was found like week 2 or something of the game releasing, and Nintendo patched them out immediately. So there's already this weird thing going on where if you want to compete on the highest level, you have to somehow obtain like an older version of the game, where the newer version is like much less optimal. It's the exact opposite, where in Breath of the Wild, when they like optimized it for the Switch, the now newest version is actually the fastest as well. So everyone is on the same page. That's like already a huge deal. And then there's things like the Great Sky Island being extremely unbreakable in many ways. So every single time, and there's this huge issue of the intro. I mean, that's another thing where if you want to play the game, you have to sit through the 4-minute unskippable cutscene every single time. There's huge issues when it comes to speedrunning, and like I said, pretty much all of the Breath of the Wild speedrunners are still speedrunning Breath of the Wild just because it's a more fun speed game. The issue then is a lot of them were also making a living, or it was like their main gig. And of course, all of the Zelda fans were interested in Tears of the Kingdom because it was the new Zelda game. So it made for this like awkward scenario where a lot of people, I feel like, were doing Tears of the Kingdom, even though they didn't like it as much. And now they ended up going back to Breath of the Wild, especially with so many people realizing Tears of the Kingdom was not really what they wanted it to be. And they went back to Breath of the Wild.
The kind of what happened with Tears of the Kingdom for me, like you mentioned that we had a podcast and it was a relatively positive podcast. And this was this post-release?
It was like a little bit post-release.
Yeah.
We had 2. I think we had one where we were just like discussing lore ideas, getting all excited, and then another one where we kind of talked about things that we liked and disliked. Where one big thing that every time I hear you talk about this, I still just like, that's my number one point, that I think we both learned from this game, or we both solidified our feelings about this idea that restriction in games isn't inherently good, and that the other way around, that restriction can be a great tool for game design, and less restriction doesn't mean better. We talked about like how the Fire Temple, you can climb walls, and how it's weird that they don't let you do it in shrines, stuff like that. But for the most part, we were I think reminiscing our playthroughs and saying that it was fun to revisit locations, and suddenly there was a well there, and like going to the depths for the first time was great. But we had some concerns, I'd say.
Yeah. See, I think that might have been the very last positive the I had with Tears of the Kingdom, because after that I did have other podcasts with other people's, and the thing that sticks out, the thing that stuck out to my mind is that in those podcasts, they would almost all degenerate into complaining, even if that wasn't the purpose of the podcast, because it was early, I still didn't really understand what the consensus was going to be, but I would bring in random people, like these are just big Zelda YouTubers, Monster Maze, Nintendo Black Crisis, like I just bring them in and ask them, and we'd start talking, and then immediately, without prompting, we'd just start complaining, and the podcast would turn into 3 hours of complaining about Tears of the Kingdom. So the one that we had might have been the last really, really positive one that existed. That's just something that always stuck in my mind. It was like, damn, I did not intend for the complaining to be as harsh as it ended up being in a lot of those.
Yeah, I think it came from the perspective of both of us kind of slowly like gathering what people were thinking about the game and not wanting to be overly negative, even if we thought something probably wasn't that right. Like I think we had the topic that we both were confused how the Shrine of Resurrection was just gone. And this was before Nintendo had their infamous interview now where they said it just disappeared.
Yeah.
And we were kind of puzzling about why that would be gone. It wasn't really explained. But for the most part, especially since I came from like a gameplay perspective and somebody who knew Breath of the Wild very well, I think for someone like me, the game might have even been more rewarding because you could notice these changes more. But when you bring in people like Monster Maze and Nintendo Black Crisis, people who focused on the lore and who probably also focused on the lore the most as they played through the game, I think it's natural how they might have had an even more negative opinion. And then even for me, when stuff like the patches happened and I thought more about how many things I disliked with the lore, I made my own like 3-hour end video. I remember using a clip that I had from that one as well. It kind of sunk in that maybe those negative feelings were actually valid and it wasn't just like a concern.
The thing is, Tears of the Kingdom is a very hypnotic game. I think that it took me a while to realize that this wasn't the best thing ever, because I distinctly remember like when I was first playing it, just trying to remain isolated from everything else. Before I got to like the first dungeon, you know, as I was going up to the lead up to that dungeon, I thought it was the wind dungeon. It was fantastic. I was having so much fun. And then you finally get to the top and you descend down into the center of the tornado. And there's that moment where you go above the clouds, and so you pierce the clouds that are overhead, and you can see the sun, and it's shining, and then you're descending down into the dungeon. That specific moment was like, oh, this is the most fun I've ever had on any Zelda game. Like, this is the best Zelda game of all time, is the thoughts that I had in it. So it deceived me. It fooled me into having fun. And it wasn't until much later that I realized, you know, taken as a whole, there's a lot I'm unhappy with.
Yeah, funny that that's literally in the sense of the word. It's peak. Like, that's peak. You're at the highest point of the game physically, and it's literally, in my opinion, even now, I said it in my video as well, that's where the game peaks. It kind of puts you into that direction as well, right? It wants you to go to the Wind Temple first. I don't know if that was your first temple.
Yes, it was.
And I felt exactly the same. You make all of these discoveries, but then you think it keeps going, but then maybe you realize, okay, this is like cave number 47, and there's still not anything special here. There's still like a bubble frog there, and it starts to feel like a little bit filler, and the lore isn't really coming together in the way you imagine it would be. And the fourth sage cutscene hits, and all of the sages are still confused who fake Zelda is, and you can't tell them, and it's starting to like fade pretty quickly. And actually, since I obviously have a lot of community members that want to talk about the game or play through the game, there is a pretty big amount of people who still haven't finished the game, from what I know, just because they got hit by that burnout I just mentioned as they were playing, and then they just put the game down. And then they probably they probably had their feelings reaffirmed as they watched those videos. That is actually a lot of people.
I noticed that I watch a YouTube channel, Arlo. He's a more casual fellow, and I like watching his videos.
I know them.
And so like I noticed that he like still hadn't finished Tears of the Kingdom like for a really long period of time, and I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, I know why you haven't finished Tears of the Kingdom. It's because you don't want to. Deep down, you realize you don't want to finish it. I don't know if he has at this point, but it was an unusually long time the last time I checked up on it.
Yeah, definitely. But that being said, I have been playing it a little bit again, coming from a different perspective now. Obviously, there's no more expectations. I know what the game is now, and I feel like I treat it as such. Like I said, it's doing a speed run where you use another thing that I really actually like doing, which I still think is underexplored, and that's unfortunate because Nintendo is very much against like modded content, obviously, and pretty much everyone who thought about wanting to do that knows that because the videos have been either taken down or threatened to be taken down.
Yeah.
But one thing I messed around with a little bit, which Tears of the Kingdom is actually great for as a game, ending on a positive note maybe, is It was something called Bingo. I don't know if you've ever heard of Bingo for like games, like Bingo competitions. Have you ever heard of those?
No.
Okay, so essentially it's just like a bingo board, but instead of numbers, it'll have goals, and the goals will be game related. So, for example, one goal could be defeat 4 flux constructs, and another one would be get 9 different Zonai devices, and another one would be get 3 activate 3 light routes or whatever. And because the game is so open playground style, it was kind of cool. A cool thing to do is like a competition. 2 people would have the same boards and race 2 different goals until one of them has a bingo. And it was really fun to watch, like as a competitive mode sort of thing. But in order for that to be really fun, people essentially needed like a mods to do stuff like skipping the intro and streamline the super long opening like a little bit more, which then again shut down the idea, because if we ever wanted to make content about it, Nintendo would probably hate it. But that is just what it is.
Okay. We could move on to Shadow of the Erdtree, but I'm actually kind of curious to ask you if you played Echoes of Wisdom, and if that's the type of thing that you're interested in, and if it is, what did you think about that? And then maybe we'll talk about the Switch 2 a little before we move forward.
Right, so I did start playing it. I was kind of into it, but not really. I basically know that this is not what I want from the Zelda franchise personally. It's what a lot of people like. And I also played the Link's Awakening remake, not really remake. I mean, kind of, right? Like the one that came out.
It's a remake, yeah.
It's basically a remake, yeah. And I enjoyed that to like an extent, but that's not what I really seek in the from the Legend of Zelda series. I played like the first dungeon and essentially thought, okay, I'm having like some amount of fun, but I know this is not going to be like my favorite game of all time, and I'll save it for if I want to do more Zelda streams. I'll have that. So I don't actually have that many thoughts on it. I did, however, like I said, start working on some notes and some thoughts about what I want from the Zelda series. That's something I'm going to put out a video on out for eventually. And I watched a video which we are pretty much on the same page. People will tell me this in the comments. What I'm working towards is like essentially like a mix of Elden Ring, Hollow Knight, Outer Wilds, and Breath of the Wilds, and like kind of mixed together, but obviously with Nintendo's polish and
that's
charm.
A great lineup. That's a great lineup of games.
Yeah. So that's more the direction I would want for the Zelda series. So yeah, not too much about Echoes of Wisdom.
Do you have any? Okay, well, let me say this about Echoes of Wisdom.
Yeah.
I gave it a positive review. I made a video on it, gave it a positive review, and I agree with that video. I agree with the positive review. I know that I'm being really lenient on it, though. Like I'm giving it way more leniency than I would other things, simply because it has pretty much real dungeons, and it's been a really long time since I've seen a real dungeon in a Zelda game, and I know that's hypnotized me. Like I'm biased in its favor specifically because it actually has a real dungeon. I feel constrained in it, at least more constrained than I would have in something like Tears of the Kingdom. And it's just really nice to see it. And so just that fact, I know that I don't think it's necessarily like the best thing ever. I think that it has some things that I like. It has some things that I think are steps in the right directions for the series in general. But I know for a fact that if I didn't have so much problems with Tears of the Kingdom and the direction that Tears of the Kingdom went, I would probably be harsher with Echoes of Wisdom. I think that's probably true.
Yeah, I can see that, especially thinking about that Aonuma interview. I think you covered that on the channel as well at one point, where he seems kind of so confused how people are against all of the freedom he gave them in Tears of the Kingdom, and how people would want to play older Zelda games if this one is so much more free, and how in his mind it seems like that's just the better way. So I guess at least seeing them experiment more in that old direction is a little bit of a relief.
Yeah,
to an extent.
Yeah, that's definitely it. There was also the one thing that was very impressive to me and I'm going to talk a little bit about spoilers for Echoes of Wisdom. So if anybody doesn't want to hear that, they should get out of the sure spoiler warning. It was really nice to see that the Triforce was back, and that the Triforce worked the way the Triforce is supposed to work. The evil Zelda gets to the Triforce at a certain point, and she touches it. But I was thinking to myself right before that shouldn't work, because if she touches the Triforce, it should split off. 2 pieces should go to Link and Zelda, and she should keep the power piece. That's how it's supposed to work in the lore. And then it worked exactly like that. And I was like, beautiful. Perfect. Is that taking into account previous lore that you established in a different game and then perpetuating it into your current game? How wonderful. Wow. When's the last time that happened?
Yeah, the only issue I have of that personally is, especially after Tears of the Kingdom now, trying to fix mistakes that were made according to the timeline. I feel like it's going to be basically impossible. One of my points I've written down here on my notes for what I would want to do with the Zelda series if I was directing it is that I would just completely make that jump now and quote unquote abandon the timeline, which some people would enjoy and some people would not enjoy. We talked about the fact that Tears of the Kingdom seemingly takes place in its own timeline when we had our last interview, and it was like to an extent confirmed. I think there was like some Nintendo dev who tried to say, oh, but like one event doesn't mean the other one didn't happen, and this can be like a different Hyrule or whatever. But then most people realized it was kind of just like a cop-out answer, and they don't really seem to care that much. It's probably one of the most conflicting topics that people talk about when it comes to Zelda. But just
we should talk about it. We should talk about it because this is an interesting thing. I have thoughts about the timeline as well. My point with that isn't that I want the timeline respected or something like that. What I'm saying is more along the lines of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which are their own. Even if we consider them their own continuity, it was upsetting in Tears of the Kingdom when it wouldn't take into account things that we know happened in canonically happened in Breath of the Wild. Characters not knowing him in the town that supposedly Link lives in. Bolson, really, it bugs me that Bolson doesn't know you. He went to the same wedding together. He sold your house to you. At least I guess that's what happened. I don't know that's what happened in Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, technically he must have. Like, literally for Hudson to leave to build Terry Town, you need to buy the house from Bolson. So, like, that's a canonic event. But yeah, I know what you mean.
So there's stuff like that really bugged me. And it's like, why? It's fine if you don't want to take into account things that you did in Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time in this continuity. But that's one game ago in its own little 2-game. It's a sequel. Come on,
it's a direct sequel. I mean, they announced it as a sequel.
Yeah. Okay. So that's more along the lines of what I was talking about. And so this game that seems to happen in it's in Hyrule. It's in old Hyrule. This is clearly the same place as A Link to the Past and A Link to Between Worlds. And so it calling back to how things worked in previous games back then, I think that's perfectly fine. See, my thing with the timeline. Yeah, it's gotten weird and convoluted, and Nintendo doesn't care about it anymore. If it ever cared about it in the first place, it did care about it in the first place. First of all, they're the ones that made the weird timeline split in Twilight Princess and Wind Waker, it's a cool split. It was a cool thing to talk about. It's a cool thing how it works, but we don't need to be beholden to the timeline anymore. Fine. I thought that's what Breath of the Wild was supposed to be in the first place. They make reference to all that other stuff that happened. Yeah. But I've always been fond of this idea that the timeline just kind of joined back up in for no reason. Enough time has happened that we ended up in this situation, and all the timelines happened. That's why we have both Zora and Ruto. That's why we have salt in the Brock salt. And apparently all these places used to be underwater. And they make reference to Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword. But it doesn't really matter, like, where it is in the timeline. It's so far in the future that it's basically its own new thing. That was fine. I was perfectly fine of just continuing that and then just ignore it. Just ignore it. But they can't just ignore it. They want the references still, even if they don't make sense. They want Fi to talk to Zelda through the sword from Skyward Sword. They want Fi making her little noises. They want the Triforce to show up on Zelda's hand. They want to make those allusions to the Temple of Time and Lon Lon Ranch, and it's cheap. It's cheap. It's cheap nostalgia. They're like, hey, remember Lon Lon Ranch? Let me play you a little remix of its song while you're walking to this place. This is clearly not Lon Lon Ranch. It can't be Lon Lon Ranch. It's been so long. What do you mean? No. So if they... I always saw Breath of the Wild and now Tears of the Kingdom as a failed attempt to separate itself from the rest of the games. I think that we don't need the timeline anymore. They can be just their own distinct things back in the past. They should make another more clean-cut attempt to restart the series. Restart it again, do it but this time, really commit to it. Don't even use ancient civilizations. Don't even use so much imagery from previous titles. Don't harken back to things so much. Don't make people question whether this is connected in this way or that way. Really make a clean break next time in a way that's obvious and that it isn't going to piss anybody off, is basically my opinion on this.
No, exactly. I mean, if anything, it annoys me that they are able to do exactly what you said they're doing, which is abusing cheap nostalgia. I mean, that's literally 80% of Nintendo's brand now, and I hope that they are forced to part ways with that idea, that they can always say, oh, remember being a child and playing Ocarina of Time and how great you felt? Let me remember you about this game. So this flawed piece of work can still sell for $70. Okay, that's really harsh wording. But essentially my point is just I hope that they are forced to do exactly what you said, make a clean cut and show us that they can still just make great games and not just abuse nostalgia. Not saying that of course there's many things great. I mean, there's undoubtedly many things great about Breath of the Wild and them breaking conventions, but then it almost seemed like with Tears of the Kingdom, they went in and tried to do things like the imprisoning war, but actually not wanting to explain it. But you remember the imprisoning war and this big event? We're not going to explain it this time, but we're going to remind you that it used to be a thing, and that's why you used to like our games. So I definitely agree, and that's one point that I had written down. I think what you can keep is I personally really enjoyed the writing of Zelda's character in this version of the Zelda games, and I think they can keep stuff without necessarily even referring to demise or the curse. Obviously, it's probably going to be about a game about bad and evil and light and dark fighting each other. That's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
But it doesn't have to be caused by. I mean, and another huge point is that I feel like they definitely need a new villain. Ganondorf had his shots, but bring in another one.
I completely agree. I have deep problems with this Ganondorf. It's specifically I didn't realize what my problem was for a really long period of time, but then it finally hit me why I don't like this Ganondorf so much, and it's because it's not Ganondorf. It's not Ganondorf. Mm-hmm. It's nothing. He's just a guy. Because in basically, I'm sure someone's gonna actually me, and I'm not even gonna address it with the Hyrule. What is it? Some kind of the Four Swords Adventures game. Don't even say it. If you don't even talk to me about Four Swords Adventures, don't even say it in the comment section. But basically, what I like about Ganondorf in Ocarina, Twilight Princess, and Wind Waker is that that's the same man. All three of those Ganondorfs is the same guy. Every iteration of Ganondorf is just that guy. There's only one Ganondorf. There's never been any other. There's never been anything other than one Ganondorf. So you have the guy in Ocarina of Time. He gets the Triforce, and then in Wind Waker, that's the adult timeline. He gets sealed away. He breaks out at some point, and this is the more mature adult Ganondorf that has had time to reflect on his action and the reason why he wanted the things in the first place. And then there's the Twilight Princess Ganondorf, and that's the one that got stopped. He gets punished. He gets sealed away. And he's still angry and vengeful and prideful and still young. And this is just really great because they had this little thing for a while where it's Ganondorf, Link, and Zelda, and they have a history together that makes sense. Even if those aren't the same Link and Zelda, it makes sense. It does feel good and timeless and eternal. But then this situation that we have over here, this is just some guy. This is not the man that from the Gerudo Valley that wanted the Triforce and to take over that kingdom. It's just some new guy that's called Ganondorf that looks kind of like Ganondorf and it's just but more muscly. It's now they're just using the name for no reason. He's nobody.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any of that history, and he's just an illusion. Like it's cheap nostalgia. Why does he?
Exactly.
Why does he have that cutscene where he goes in front of the King of Hyrule and kneels and pretends to do it? They're just doing like a remake of Ocarina. So many of those things are just a remake of Ocarina. Hey, you remember back in Ocarina of Time when you looked through the window and he kneeled in front of the king? Look, we're doing it again here. Why does he have round ears and the other Gerudo in the same cutscene have pointy ears? Don't worry about it. You don't need to care about things like that. We're not thinking about it that deeply. We're just using cheap nostalgia on you.
Yeah, and then they put in things like the quote-unquote details, like the names of the swords, hinting towards his mothers, but they won't actually explain it and won't put any depth in there, just because if it's noticed, it's like, oh, it's just like Ocarina of Time. Is it the same guy? But it's exactly like you said. It's just an evil guy called Ganondorf who has no history and is mad for no reason, or at least for not a reason that we'll ever learn. And it works because of the name and the nostalgia that they've built over years, but fails to offer anything new and actually be interesting.
And it's not even fair to the games that they're making, because okay, so in my video that I made, I talked about how I actually do like the story of Breath of the Wild. I actually do like it.
Yeah.
When we're actually focusing on the story of Breath of the Wild. The problem is that it's stuck in memory cutscenes. But the actual things that happen in those memory cutscenes, those are a story arc that the rest of the Breath of the Wild doesn't have. You have a rising action. You have Zelda wanting to unlock her magical powers and not realizing why and not figuring it out and being resentful of Link and hating herself and feeling like a failure and quarreling with her father. Yeah. It's really powerful stuff. It has a rising action. It has a conclusion. It has a resolution. She puts Link away. It's a great story. If that story had been happening not in memory cutscenes, but as actual events that was happening to Link, I think it would be wonderful. Like, I really like that story. It just doesn't exist. It's just details. 100%.
And I feel like it could have been almost worked out if they just made the time skip like a little bit shorter. Like maybe you play in like two versions, one where you actually walk around and you lose like Mipha in front of you, a character that you actually grow to like, and then it's 5 years later and it's now revenge time or something. Mm-hmm. But the exact problem is that, and that's why I said I wouldn't want them to try and fix the timeline, and I completely agree with you with the full-on break, is because just like you said, it's literally it's not benefiting the game, it's benefiting the cheap nostalgia hit that works for like 5 minutes, but is actively sabotaging the game. Like, they could have written a new villain that has nothing to do with Ganondorf, who would have probably been 10 times more interesting.
Yep.
They didn't. It failed, and that's why I don't want them to do that next time.
I'm curious now, you said you were working on a video talking about kind of your dream Zelda game, and we have the Switch 2 coming. We don't know when the next Zelda game is coming. I'm sure it is coming.
Right.
Are you deep enough along that you want to spoil some of that video here?
I can. I think I was actually thinking about this the other day, because the announcement that Tears of the Kingdom is being made happened like 2 years after the Breath of the Wild release. Like 2017, Breath of the Wild came out, and 2019.
Really?
They at least gave us, 2019 is when they gave us that little, in the summer E3 Nintendo presentation, they gave us the little, like the very first thing. It's just like them heading down and you see Ganondorf corpse, and it's like the sequel is in development or something. And with that like big Nintendo Switch 2 announcement coming up, I think there's like a 2% chance that they'll have like a tiny slide that shows us the direction they're going in. I'm not actually expecting it. There's many things that have like a higher priority. I think right now there hasn't been a 3D Mario in like 8 years or something. But it's interesting to at least think about. But I can talk about it. So basically, I do want them to stay open world to an extent, but I would like them, and I also wanted this in Tears of the Kingdom. I would like for them to mix in some restriction. What I kind of imagine is, for example, a world where there's 5 dungeons you can do in any order, but there's 3 more that you can't do yet. So like essentially like late game areas. You can do those 5 in any order, and then you can do the next one in any order. And you could also work with multiple endings where, for example, if you only beat the first 5, you can unlock like a pretty unsatisfying ending. But if you do the harder 3 additional ones, you can unlock a second ending. And there's like a third ending that requires you to actually pay attention to the lore and the world building and learn stuff to unlock like the super secret, like satisfying third ending. That's my main outline for the design. And what I would want is I would want Link and Zelda, or it could either be. I really like this version of Link and Zelda just in terms of Zelda's writing, but I feel like it would be too problematic to just use them because you would have to acknowledge their past, which is already flawed. So I wouldn't mind if it was a new version of Link and Zelda, a hero and a priestess on a journey exploring the world or whatever, and I would want them to reach a new world, not Hyrule, but a different world that still has similar themes, like the theme of maybe a reoccurring dark. I enjoyed thinking about in my story it was more about nightmares and sleep, so it kind of like this reoccurring period of people and the land being plagued by nightmares, just to give it a little bit of a different name. I'm still cooking on some stuff when it comes to the story. I'm mostly thinking about the gameplay elements so far. And what I would like.
It's interesting that you're mentioning that. When Tears of the Kingdom's first trailer came out and it showed Link and Zelda apparently going underground on a journey, and they have that little ox cart thing. I was always fascinated by the idea of having traveling as a core part of the gameplay. It would be really interesting to me if at some point they maybe keep a large open world structure, but don't really expect you to just freely explore so much. They have this kind of little you're exploring alongside with Zelda, like a slower experience. It takes more effort to get to places, it takes more resources to get to places. I've always wondered if they could do something with that, because it really is a compelling trailer that they kind of just didn't do anything with, where it has both of you traveling alongside this little ox.
I mean, that guy was really scrapped, or he's like in a side quest or something, but he never actually shows up.
Yep. But please continue.
Right. So I've been mostly thinking about the gameplay side of things, and one thing that I focus on in my like thought experiment is there's these 2 ways of progression in games that I've come to really like, and neither of them is really being used in Tears of the Kingdom just because it's such an open game, and they almost they do progression through like a heart container upgrades, or I mean, I guess the Sage abilities, which are a little underbaked in Tears of the Kingdom, but you can already go anywhere by default. And those two ways of progressing are what Hollow Knight is using a lot, which is like item-based. In Hollow Knight, it's more like ability-based progression, where you get teased that there's like a hidden area there, but you can't quite jump high enough. And once you unlock the double jump, suddenly it clicks and you can revisit this place. That's also interesting from a difficulty perspective, because suddenly you can balance things a little more, where for somebody to be up there, they must have unlocked the double jump. And the double jump is only behind like this boss fight, so you can put more difficult enemies there because somebody has beaten that boss before they go up there. And then additionally, one thing that I would love them to experiment with is like the knowledge-based progression. That's something like Outer Wilds is using, where you can technically go wherever you want, but you can only go there once you know how to. And I feel like I haven't actually really seen a game combine those two. From the perspective of, let's say, there is to use like very like known Zelda terms. Let's say there's just a high up place that you can't reach yet, but there's a grappling hook spot there. So you need the grappling hook to go there. But then once you are up there, there's also a riddle that you can only solve once you have learned something from a different place, and kind of take a progression from that perspective. So it would make it so that once you know the thing, so the common issue, without going into Outer Wilds spoilers, but the common issue with Outer Wilds is that since a lot of it depends about knowing things, once you know the thing, you can't really unknow the thing. And the consecutive playthroughs of the game, basically, you could just reach the end because you know how to get there. So remixing the item progression into it makes it so that replayability at least demands you to acquire certain items. And so kind of like putting both together. For example, in what I just explained, there's 5 dungeons, but there's 3 additional ones, and each of them requires a specific item and a specific piece of knowledge you have to learn in the original 5 dungeon open world space, is something I would like them to experiment with. Obviously, I'm not actually a trained game designer, but it's just an approach I would like to see. And I would have already liked to. I would have loved if they've already tried that in Tears of the Kingdom. I was upset to find out, especially from a speedrunning perspective, which is funny because you think speedrunners just want to be done as quickly as possible, but in reality, speedrunners just want to do something fun. So being able to go to the final boss with like the least amount of stuff, like basically just after you beat the tutorial again, was underwhelming for me. I was hoping that you would at least maybe the Master Sword this time, or you would need to do a certain thing in the world first. But no, you can just go there again. And I think from a game design perspective, having both would be more interesting.
It really is like very upsetting to me now. The more I think about it, you don't need the Master Sword to go and beat the final boss. Like even if I don't.
Have you ever went without the Master Sword?
I have not.
Okay, because it's worse. Because when you beat Ganon, they just give it to you.
Oh my God.
Which is like, it makes a little bit of sense because obviously the final fight takes place on the Light Dragon, so it's just there. But you just pull it, like you just get it. It doesn't matter how much stamina you have, you just pull it because you're on the Light Dragon, and then you have it, but you've done nothing. You just went there.
Well, you don't even really need it at that point. Not really. You've already beaten Ganondorf with it, at least in his human form, in which you would be using the sword mostly.
True.
It's okay, but it's like so much of the game gets invalidated by not having the Master Sword for the boss fight, like for the sword boss fight, because it's like the whole premise is that she's like, oh, I'm going to heal this sword by staying in my dragon form and infusing it with holy energy so that it's strong enough to fight Ganondorf, even though it's not strong enough for whatever reason, just because we said so. And then I just beat him with a stick. It's fine. You didn't need to do all that. I just beat him with a stick.
Yeah. I mean, the weapon system is like the other thing I put a lot of thought into. And I saw some comments on your video there, and I know I'm going to get the exact same ones where people will accuse me of just wanting like another From Software. Yeah. But listen, hear me out on this, and maybe the same people as well. Like, imagine that these classic Zelda weapons just work like Elden Ring. You have to find them in like hidden away places, and they have like weapon arts, and you can find the Master Sword, and it's like not the best weapon in the game per se, but it has like a really cool weapon art. But if you want to, you can also beat the game with the wooden swords if you level it up enough. I feel like it would just go. It would, for me, it would be so much more fun. And they went a step back in Tears of the Kingdom in that regard. They went like a step forward and a step back. They at least made it so that different weapons have these different modifiers, like the one spear that doubles attack when you're wet, and the other spear that does more damage when you are doing a flurry rush or whatever. But they went back a step, that essentially you just take the weapon with the highest number and then you just hit, which oftentimes will be a spear because it hits especially fast. When in Breath of the Wild there at least was some niche weapons like the elemental weapons that they had a reason to be used. If you wanted to freeze an enemy, you could use an ice weapon. Now it doesn't matter what weapon you fuse the ice material to, so weapons seem even less cool. Like what I want is and I feel like that. We'll talk about Elden Ring, but that's what I feel like in Elden Ring. I have like a connection to these weapons. I love this weapon. I really like, and this is going to be important when people play Nightreign, but this was already important for me when I played like randomizers. Oh, it's the Health and Steeple. I love this weapon. It's fun to use. Oh, it's the Blasphemous Blade. That's really strong in this play style. In Tears of the Kingdom, it's just like, I don't really care what stick I put my Lionel horn on.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. See, so the accusations that, oh, you just want Elden Ring, you want Zelda, you want all the games to be like Elden Ring, you want all the games to be like From Software games. The thing is, it's like, in that video, I gave lots of specific examples of Zelda having already done stuff like that. So I talk about how I don't want to go into a menu to heal. You know, I just don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to go into the menu and heal. Like, just forget about the difficulty aspect of it. Just forget, just the process of pushing the start button and stuffing your face. We should have abandoned that with Skyrim. Like, we should have stopped doing that long ago. This has nothing to do with Elden Ring. And I gave examples of Zelda having done stuff like that. We used to have potions. We used to have potions that you could just use to heal. In Skyward Sword, it was real-time potion use, because he would have to walk around as he's drinking the potion and avoid attacks while he's using the potion, like it's Monster Hunter. And so, like, look, you don't have to look at From Software. This is game design elements that they understood way back when. You know,
that's exactly what it is. I mean, like, I think people didn't know that they wanted a From Software game like Breath of the Wild. And then they got Elden Ring and everyone loved it. And maybe now people don't know that they want a Zelda game like Elden Ring and take it one step further with the Nintendo charm. And once that's out, everyone wants that game.
Yeah. It's exactly like that. And like, Nintendo has known that menus are bad. Like, they know that because what do we have? We have in Skyward Sword was an evolution from something like Ocarina of Time, in that if you wanted to use a fire arrow, you didn't have to go into a menu anymore to do it.
Yeah.
You know, you could just click a button. Now you have a fire arrow. Now you have an ice arrow. Now you have a light arrow. And you don't have to stop your game, go into a menu, select it, and equip it in that way. In the Ocarina of Time remake, they no longer have to... You can just tie the iron boots to a button. You know, you can just push a button, iron boots go down, you can do the water temple without having to do looking in your menu every second of every damn dungeon to do stuff like that. Like, that's a good idea. It has nothing to do with the difficulty exactly. Like, maybe that's part of it, but can we just stop with the fucking menus? They're already atrocious. They're atrocious in Echoes of Wisdom. They're atrocious in Tears of the Kingdom. I don't want to spend half of my combat time selecting a weapon, fusing this to that, selecting what thing I want to fuse to my arrow. Oh, now I want to hit it with a lightning thing. Let me scroll to the right because I haven't used the lightning stuff in a really long time. Grab the thing, fuse it, and then it's abysmal. It's nothing to do with From Software. Just stop doing that.
No, I mean, while I already completely agree on the healing point, and that's something I literally go down here in my script and it says no more healing. The way I would do it is I press a button and you like pray to the goddess Hylia or whatever, makes you slower for 2 seconds. And yeah, it's just an Estus flask or whatever. But it's good. It's good game design. You can't just heal for free. You have to time. I mean, Hollow Knight does it as well. A lot of games that have combat that's praised don't just allow you to heal while the enemy is doing some flurry attack. And you just pause. You have to find windows to heal. But that aside, like, I have watched one of my most popular YouTube videos ever was me reacting to, like, there's these people that are literally combat players in Breath of the Wild. They are insanely good at, like, the combat of the game, and they're fighting Lionels in a stylish way with all of these glitches, and it looks really cool. And most of them as well, just like the speedrunners, just quit in Tears of the Kingdom because it's unwatchable unless you do editing now. Because if you want to do cool fusions, you have to go into a menu like 40 times during the fight. So you have to do 40 cuts, and you can't just do the cool thing you could do in Breath of the Wild where you get a clip and then you just post it with the Twitter like clip function, because that's just the game. So they made it worse in that regard.
Yeah. All right, I'm done with things to complain about in Tears of the Kingdom. I think that's everything I wanted to bitch about.
Quick recap.
Yeah. So I guess we could talk about Elden Ring, since we want everything to be Elden Ring, apparently. Did you how did you enjoy Shed of the Erdtree? Did you like it?
I did. I did enjoy it a lot. I went into it mostly blind. It's really funny. Wait, I was literally, and this actually because I didn't know we were doing this recording today, but I was actually watching you reacting to the previews of the game today. It's still like I feel like just how people are chasing the high they would get during like um when Breath of the Wild came out, I chased the high that people got when they were reacting to like Elden Ring news and especially Elden Ring DLC news. And it was you watching like the Vati preview event or whatever when he got to learn. That's basically everything I knew. I knew about like Ballarat and I knew about Castle Ensis and I knew about the stuff in the previews and everything else was blind. I did not watch the launch trailer. Which I'm glad about because I found out later that it showed stuff like one of the coolest attacks that like Bale does and stuff. So I'm glad I didn't watch that. So I went in blind to that extent. I knew the previous stuff, and that's pretty much it. And I mean, yeah, I think my opinions on it have only changed to the extent that there is flaws with it. When I was playing it, I thought it was essentially a flawless experience, other than maybe when I reached the final boss and I got a little bit mad, like everyone else probably. Even though I remember after beating it, I still, in my stream, even said that I still had fun because as much as it was bullshit, especially the version that I fought during the release, I haven't actually fought him recently. Apparently, he's like a lot slower. I still, it felt like you're actually fighting a god. It was a little bit bullshit, but it felt like this is kind of crazy. I can't believe I beat this. And another flaw would be that the areas seem a little bit empty if you really think about it. Like there's lots of like empty space, which is the occasional like cookbook or whatever around. But that's not really what I even cared about that much when I played the game. Shadow of the Erdtree has, in my opinion, still outside of the final boss, the best boss fights in Elden Ring. It has the prettiest like art direction in Elden Ring, and the flaws only really go to what I just talked about, and maybe to some extent the lore. It's a bit upsetting knowing that it's probably, at least for now, the end of Elden Ring, and there's definitely a lot of questions unanswered and a lot of topics never really truly touched on. From Godwin stuff to us never really ultimately knowing what like Marika's sin was to ascend to godhood in the first place. But I mean, yeah, like I'd say, for example, Mesmer is probably my favorite boss fight in the Elden Ring games.
So good. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel similarly about the lore. I'm filtered. I don't get it in a satisfactory way. I don't get the lore as much as I would like to. I think that I would like another one. I thought that I was kind of done with Elden Ring, and I'm like, okay, that's enough. The story's concluded. I don't need any more. I just want the DLC, and that's it. But I have questions, and I don't have clear answers, and I want more to. Well, the thing is, with something like Dark Souls, you had Dark Souls 1, and Dark Souls 1 was its game. Then they made Dark Souls 2. It was, had its problems. Not everybody liked it, but it was clearer about what was going on in the game. Like, it made the themes of Dark Souls more explicit. NPCs would directly talk about it. And then Dark Souls 3 just was like, in case you didn't get it yet, dummy, this is what it's about. And then the DLC was even more that. This is what everything was about. Let me explain it to you with the Ashes of Ariandel DLC. And then make it so clear with the ending of the last DLC that everybody just can understand it. It's like, okay, well, thank you. Well, thank you for that. Totally get it now. I would like something like that for Elden Ring, for the dummies amongst us, which I include myself in, with that I didn't really understand everything that was going on. Give me more information to make it more clear, please, and do that in a game format. Not right now. I don't want it right now. Give it to me in like 10 years. Give it to me in like 5 years or something. Announce it 5 years from now, and let me know. I do want more Elden Ring related stuff. And like in Dark Souls, you don't have to be in the lands between. You could. Dark Souls 2 was not in the same area as Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 3 was not in the same area as Dark Souls 1. Well, eventually it was, but you're in a different kingdom and in different context. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for going forward, Elden Ring wise.
it's difficult with FromSoft because that's one way to see it. And I'm sure in many ways we are all dummies and they thought about things that we haven't thought about. But I'm also sure that there's other things that they don't really have an answer on. Like, of course, they're great writers and they put in so much thought and detail. But at the end of the day, they're not actually narrating events of a real world. And they're still like writing in there. And there's probably some gaps that they have never filled out. And I think the DLC, to some extent, I mean, I don't really know your thoughts on it. Some people were curious if that was already scratching the surface of that, where, of course, they have this like seemingly satisfying answer that this is what Melania whispered in Redan's ear, by the way. But was that actually thoughts like that from the beginning, or did they just fill in the gaps to make it work?
Yeah, I don't agree. I don't think there are any gaps. I think that all of it was if we take them seriously from what they've said, I think that there are. They can change stuff around, you know, but I'm sure that Mesmer was real. Like that was in George R.R. Martin's original documents. Like that, what Melania said to Redan, I think that was real. I don't think they're making stuff up or retconning things along those lines.
I'm willing to believe that as well. But there's then other questions. Like you can keep asking questions about outer gods. And like I said, Marika's original sin, is this something do they have an answer to that? That they just will never tell us? Or did they just leave that gap?
Yeah, I think they do. I think they do. Like there was an interview with Miyazaki talking about how he leaves gaps for people to try and come up with their own interpretation, and how he'll never tell anybody what Dark Souls is about. Because, you know, the process of interpretation is more important to him than the actual answer. Like, who cares about the answer? The answer's stupid. But he has an answer. He makes the story, and then he takes stuff out. Story gets made, then he takes stuff out, and then, all right, try and figure out what was there. I believe him. I believe that's how it is. There is an answer, I think, and that he thinks about and knows and has in his stupid Martin Bible that he won't share with me. Give it to me. Yeah. Give me that stupid Martin Bible. But but so there is. I do think there is a way that outer gods work that would make sense if it was explained to us. There is a thing that the Mother of Truth is, and there's elements about her that we don't know and we have no way of knowing because we don't have the context of it. That might become more clear in future titles if they choose to. I don't think so. There's this idea with the Godwin people. Like the Godwin people really like the idea that Godwin was supposed to be the guy that Miquella revives, that wasn't Radahn, and that Radahn was retconned into it. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I think that Godwin is comatose. I think it was clear in the base game that he was never a thing. He's dead. Like, he's super dead, and he's not. There was no way out of it. Maybe you can take Miquella's trying to revive him in Castle Soul. Maybe it wasn't Radahn and he was trying to revive him. But even if that was the case, like, it didn't work, and I don't think there was a way for it to work. I think it was very clear in the base game that Godwin is just not. Is not a thing. He's not the kind of thing you're going to be able to do anything about. So it's just a matter of perspective. I'm not going to tell other people you can't think that Miyazaki's just making shit up on the fly. You can think that. I personally don't. It's basically.
I also don't. By the way, I just wanted to say that there is these concerns, and then that's why I say it's difficult, because I saw like a video not too long ago where it really just seems like everyone wrote their own master thesis on this game for this to actually work this way, because there's details like that the shadowy figures in the Shadow Keep have like chains on their arms, which makes you think that those were like slaves to the Hornsent, which why it suddenly makes sense that they would have joined Mesmer forces, because they were already like oppressed by the Hornsent, and like all of these like tiny details that no one will actually really see. They're all there and they're all in place. Basically, all I'm trying to say is I would obviously enjoy more Elden Ring, but especially with the perspective of Zelda we just had, even though they're on two completely different levels, as long as it makes sense and as long as it's not like people really loved Elden Ring, let's fill in some gaps because we can make another game. But if there's actually enough out there that's thought through, that makes sense, then I would love to see it.
Well, yeah, as long as it's something that they want to do, you know, especially I would hope that Miyazaki would direct it if there was going to be an Elden Ring 2 or a a sequel of some kind. If he doesn't want to do it, fine. I accept it. Yeah. Go work on whatever it is. Go make your Armored Core 2 or whatever it is that you're going to be personally working on. But I personally would really love to get another opportunity to explore around in the same universe that Elden Ring takes place in.
I know we both just played the Nightreign network test, and I guess it makes sense to talk about that soon, even though that's less lore oriented.
Yeah, we can.
I would like to quickly ask, even though it's like a little bit a slightly different topic, because that's something I also thought about. I don't know if you have. If it's not another Elden Ring, do you have like a specific wish or idea what the Miyazaki-led team is working on right now, or something that you would like to see?
The politically correct answer is let Miyazaki do whatever he wants. Let him, make him a new IP. Let him be creative.
Be selfish. I want you to be selfish.
Yeah, but whatever that game is it's gonna come anyway. Whatever that happens to be, that's going to come anyway. There's going to be eventually a new IP, a Miyazaki-led team that he's just making something brand spanking new, and it'll be awesome, and it'll be the best thing ever, just like all the other fucking things that he makes. Fine. But if I was going deep in my heart, the real answer is probably like Bloodborne 2 or something like that. See, the thing is, the Bloodborne is done, people. They're like, oh, Bloodborne's complete. He doesn't have to go back to Bloodborne. I don't like the idea of just abandoning. Okay, let me explain how I feel about Bloodborne, because we need added context. Bloodborne is a really interesting situation where you created a new gameplay style by restricting what you can do as a player. So you take a normal Souls game, you get rid of your ability to use shields. Shields are shitty now, and you get rid of fat armor. You're going to be light dodging the entire time. And the fantasy of Bloodborne is that the beasts are so strong that there's just no point in using a shield. In fact, I think they say that in the shield item description. There's no point. Why would you use a shield? They're so strong, it's going to breast. You can't parry something with a shield. You can't parry a beast with a shield because they're so strong. you like shifting their momentum or their direction isn't going to do anything. It'll tear right through armor. It'll tear right through shields. You have to avoid it. You have to dodge it and get out of the way. That's the fantasy and if you're going to parry them, it's going to take a shotgun to the face to get them off balance to be able to do a versatile attack. That's the thing. You are a hunter. Like you're not some undead. You're a monster. Like you've been taking blood. You're pumped up. You're as dangerous as the things that you're fighting. And just with all of these things by themselves, you have created a new gameplay style through subtraction. Really. Force them into a certain type of build. I think Sekiro did the same kind of thing, but it's very different. Sekiro is even more different than something like Bloodborne. So Bloodborne's still very much a Souls game, but you're taking away your shields, you're forcing you to use fastness, you're speedy, you're strong, and even the slow weapons are very fast comparatively to something like Souls games. And it bothers me that we're just going to not do anything with it anymore. So you're telling me From Software's never going to use gun parries again? No shotgun parries? We're not going to use the Victorian aesthetic that Bloodborne used so well? Forget Bloodborne. Like forget even like Bloodborne 2. Just a new game that uses a lot of the elements from like the gun parries, the dodging, the less focus on armor. I don't necessarily need it to be Bloodborne. I feel the same way about Sekiro. You invented this deflecting gameplay style in Sekiro, and tons of other Souls-likes have copied your homework. Liza P, Lords of the Fallen, Kazan, all of these other Souls-like that are coming out, like they've all started using deflects. Why? Because deflects are awesome. Deflects are cool. And you used it one time, and I guess now in Nightreign there's the deflecting guy in the trailer, and there's the deflecting tier in Shadow of the Erdtree, which makes me think that they're experimenting. They're making it like they're going to use it. Their next game's coming, and it's finally going to have a deflecting element to it. So my thing basically is, I don't want all of this other stuff that they've made to just fall by the wayside. What do you mean there's never going to be another Sekiro? Forget Sekiro. It's not about the story that I'm talking about. It's about the mechanics. It's about From Software using those mechanics and iterating on the mechanics that they invented that other people use and iterate on. From Software will do it better. Do it. Iterate on your shit.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I also thought about this a little bit, and even though I feel very strongly about Sekiro and Bloodborne as their own franchises as well, what I would like to see them do is combine them once again, but in a different way, and let go of another restriction, which the only restriction that I feel like has been pretty consistent throughout those games has been the kind of like arsenal of weapons, and them some to at least to an extent. Of course, there's like magic. There's like magic staffs in Elden Ring, but they at least are like to an extent bound to reality. And one way I would like to see them get rid of them is by actually at one point doing a space game. And before, when people think about space game, they think about Starfield or whatever maybe now, or they think about Outer Wilds. But and Outer Wilds is actually closer to what I would want. I would love if there was, like, let's say there's 8 planets that you get to explore, but they are like the wildest different planets that you could think of, and they're not like Starfield where it's like 1600 planets that can appear in all ways. They're all like completely cooked through. Like there might be a planet that is Victorian based or whatever, where there's like this like medieval Victorian civilization where you can fight bosses and weapons of that style, but it could also be something completely like futuristic where there's a plasma sword and you have like an overheating laser gun that's not like a first person thing, but like mix it all up and give each planet their own like world building and story, and like use some like cosmic horror elements again, as we know Miyazaki likes to do that. I would just like to see what they would do if they had like 6 different themes and one game.
Wow, that would be something else. I mean, I wouldn't even know what something like that would look like coming from Software.
I would like to see it, but we'll see. I feel like it's probably time somewhat soon, maybe not this year, but somewhat soon, to hear what the Miyazaki team is cooking on.
I think this year we're going to get something.
It might be this year. Yeah. It might even be the Summer Games Fest this time around, because
that's what I'm hoping
is dropping
for.
Just before, and then we don't know what's happening.
That's what I'm hoping for.
But anyway.
Okay, well, let's talk about Nightreign, I suppose, now that we got through everything else. Yeah. Did you play it? What did you think of it?
I did. I played close to like 12 hours, I'd say. I was trying to play the first network test, and just like everyone else, was essentially looking at the loading screen for most of the time. I did get at least into the roundtable hole later on, the weapons and like the new effects the legendary weapons have, but it took me until 4 a.m. for me that night to actually get into a game, because I was so excited for it. I really wanted to play it. I think, just to like elaborate on that fact, I do have like over 1,000 hours in Elden Ring, and not all of them come from just like playing casually, but a lot of them come from doing randomizer runs where obviously all of the bosses are random. You find random weapons and you just have to make them work. That's something I've always enjoyed. I do enjoy my roguelikes. I have probably like 300 hours combined in Hades 1 and 2. I also speedrun those games. I got into Balatro like a lot of other people. This year, I have a fair share of Slay the Spire. I'm going to copy the line that Iron Pineapple said in his video. Nightreign, I'm like in the center of the Venn diagram for who this game is for. Like literally dead center. So I was really excited for it, and I got to play on that 4 a.m. session. I did not get to play with pre-mates at all. I had like a party ready for on Sunday with 2 other like randomizer speedrunner players. Would have been really fun, but we somehow didn't make the password system work, even though they said they were going to enable it. So I only played with randoms. I actually did a solo run because both of my teammates disconnected, and I did reach the Night Lord, and I have some thoughts to share as well on the solo experience, even though it's probably not balanced. But overall, I had a blast with most things, and this is me assuming, and I'm not sure if you think the same, that even though the gameplay loop is going to be somewhat close to the final version, but the like randomization and a lot of the other systems we've probably seen like 2% of.
Yes.
In this network test.
Yeah, that's what I think. Okay, well, so here's the thing. I loved it. I had a lot of fun with it, and I loved it specifically when I finally got to be able to play with my friends. The last session, I got to play the final session, and that one, the Master Sword the password matchmaking worked, and we finally got to make callouts. That was the most fun for me. That was wonderful. Yeah. I really adored it. However, even though I had a positive impression to it, like I had a bunch of complaints. Like I have a bunch of complaints, but I this is going to come out in a video that I'm releasing today, but I don't know how to assess these complaints because these complaints might only have to do with the network test. You know, these might be things that only have to do with this test and don't apply to the main game. My biggest worry, and this is something I'm going to throw a hissy fit about if it turns out to be true. My biggest worry is that the entire biome of every map against every boss is going to be Limgrave oriented. It's going to be Limgrave aesthetic. I don't want everything to be Limgrave, and then you have little splotches of, okay, there's lava right here, and then there's like a little splotch of rot over here with Caelid. Preferably, what I would like is if, okay, so the first Night Lord has this map that we've been doing it, or variations on this map, and this one's Limgrave. But then let's say you decide to go to Night Lord 2, and maybe this one has a Liurnia aesthetic. You know, most of the overworld is Liurnia. It's got crystals. It's got the fog. It's got the towering peaks and the cool looking areas. And then you have the Altus Plateau with the yellow trees and the beautiful flowers, petals falling. I don't know. Enemy encampments dotting the environment. Stuff like that. The Eternal Cities. Elden Ring has such a wonderful art style that I think it would be a real crime if every map for every boss in the entire time that I'm playing this game is just going to copy the Limgrave aesthetic that we saw in the network test over and over and over, with little splotches of other things elsewhere. I don't know yet if that's going to be the case. My worry is that there are some Eternal City structures in the trailer that you can see.
Yeah.
And my concern is, well, what if that's just like part of the randomizer? So a Eternal City like Celia plops down in one spot of the map, but if you were to leave that little area, it'd be more Limgrave. That's kind of my concern. Yeah, you see the lava area and you seem to be underground. Okay, what if that's just one map has the possibility of having a lava area, and if you leave that little area, you'll find more Limgrave. That's basically my worry. I would throw a fit if it was just Limgrave all over the place on every map.
Yeah, I can definitely see that worry. And it doesn't help that they decided to name it Limwelt.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't think it will be like that, especially when I went back to the trailer and there's this huge chunk that's essentially just like Lane Dell, and there's this other chunk that's literally underground. That's the Sekiro parry guy. He's fighting like an omen, and there's like a lake of rod structure on the ground.
Yes.
I would more think that essentially Limgrave is one biome that can appear, but that every single run is going to be some amalgamation of a new Elden Ring map. A Limgrave biome might not even be included in the one you're playing. And then maybe additionally there could be a layer where like there's two kinds of maps. One is like an underground map and one is an overground, and they mix together like fitting biomes to make that map work. That's all I want.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah. I have no complaints if that's the case. Okay, I'm glad you think that you're alleviating some of my concerns just by saying that.
I hope I'm right, and I hope it's exactly. It would be pretty sad to see just like, and I feel like it's From Software, right? Like Shadow of the Erdtree is maybe as big as Limgrave, right? I think that's the motto here. They like, and I know it's not a Miyazaki title, but they like to under promise and then over deliver. And I feel like it would just be weird if it was Limgrave and then there's like a random rod spider lake there suddenly, or like a random. I don't even know how the underground stuff would work. Like, yeah, there's the mines in the network test version, so I guess you could go into a cave and it turns out to be that, but I really don't think so. I think it's gonna be. That's what I said. I'm also making a video about this, and ideally, what I would want to. Because this, I don't know if this was your experience, but I think there was two seeds, right, in this network test. Like, you come from the top or you come from the bottom. From what I remember, like either you start at the bottom, it's like the fire briar dudes, or you come from the top and Loretta's there, and there's like the flame chariots. Ideally, I would want a world where every single time you drop, you just don't know where you are. Like you're just lost again. Of course, you know things like this camp is especially powerful for leveling up. I should go to a church at some point. I should level up my weapon, but you don't know where that is yet, and you don't know where you are. Because I ended up having like routes for each of the seats. Like I drop at the bottom. Okay, I go here. I approach the bottom. I get like the triple loot orb. Oh, I'm at the top. I kill the flame chariots because they're one shot if I do the crit attack. And like that's what I don't want. It's obviously nice to acquire knowledge and become better in the process, but I would like to get lost every time. That's like the dream. And then especially if it's
that's
also
the roguelite. That's the roguelite. You know, the strength. The most fun parts of it is when things go awry. If you so. Yeah, again, this is another thing. The repetitive map in the network test bothers me, but again, like it's the kind of criticism where I'm like, I don't think that's going to be part of the main game. You know, ideally in the main game, you won't even be in Limgrave. Hopefully,
right.
You'll have a random chance to be Limgrave, Altus type looking area, whatever. There'll be a bunch of different biomes, and then even if you do get a map, this little spot won't necessarily be there. It might not be fire chariots there. It might be something else completely. Like that little, they talked about how there's more procedural generation in the main game. So, you know, surprises upon surprises is basically what I want. And me not being able to like have routes on every map.
For sure. One thing that I feel like will definitely be in the final release of the game, and that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, are the classes. At least the 4 that were available now. Like, which ones did you like? Which one was your favorite? Which one did you not like as much? And what, I guess we kind of know what will come from the trailer as well. We have like a rough idea what the other 4 classes will be. But from the ones that were available, what did you think?
I love Wilder. Wilder is my boy. He is basically all I've used. I couldn't get off of him. I couldn't bring myself to go use something else. He's got that big main character energy to him. I love his little pile driver. The Recluse is probably super cool too. I didn't use her, but her magic system is way better, I think, than... I kind of hate the way magic works in Souls games. I kind of have hated it for a long time. I don't like scrolling up and down the stupid wheel, and you know, this isn't like a straight upgrade. I don't think this is different, but I am in favor of games kind of complicating the magic system a little bit, because it's supposed to be this intellectual thing. You raise intelligence to be able to use magic. It should be a little complicated, and the Recluse kind of fits that. I like her ultimate. You know, you take a bit of magic, and depending on what the combination says, that's the spell that she ends up casting. That's wonderful. That's a great thing. So I'm pro Recluse, but at the moment I think I'm going to end up using Wilder, unless the bow guy or the samurai guy that has the deflecting are super fun to play. Then those might be well, I think the way that the story, I'm going to have to use everybody, because I think the way that the story works is that each character needs to kill each Night Lord to know about what's going on. I think they progress stories individually in that way. And they each have their own story. I think I saw an interview saying that. You can correct me if you didn't.
Well, I can correct you because I didn't, but I could see how it works like that, especially since you can talk to the ones you're not actively using and the roundtable hold. And I thought about this just today, because there is a feature that allows you to, again, this might be a network test thing, but you can currently change the character in the rounds. You picked him at the start of the match anyway, so there should be some reason why you need to change your character in the roundtable hold that might be lore related.
Yes, you talk to different characters, and they'll have different things to say as their story progresses, apparently. I am curious what the 8th character is, because we know the 4 that we have in the network test. We know about the samurai, the warrior, and the bow guy, so that's 3 more. Yeah. We just are missing the last one. I
heard some rumors about it potentially being like a summon guy. I don't know if there was anything to back that up, or if this was just an idea.
There was, that's true. That's true. One of the director had an interview, and he said that one of the there are no ash summons, but one of the characters uses spirit ash summons as part of their gameplay gimmick. So they'll have that. I was curious as to maybe if it was the Duchess, because the Duchess those things kind of look like Ash summons, but I suppose they're not. So
Oh, right. When you use like the rewind damage thing, it kind of turns into like a spirit summon version ish. But like gameplay wise, it's not really that.
yeah, I don't think that there'll be real Ash summons. It'll just be someone's power, and so it's either the 8th character or he was talking about the Duchess. I'm gonna assume it's the 8th character for the moment.
Right. Yeah, I mean, just to quickly talk about this, I feel pretty much the exact same way. I still have my document open for my Zelda wishes, and one says movement, use the grappling hook for movement in Zelda. So that's where Wilder immediately got lots of points for me. It just feels so fun. My very first kill on the Night Lords, I actually grappling hooked through the flame that Gladius was doing and then like jumped with the momentum to kill him. It was like a pretty cool clip.
Does it have iframes?
I'm not sure. I never actually intentionally used it like that. It might have just been me getting missed because I like the terrain and the final boss fight is like sometimes the flame will miss you if you're like on a lower part of the dune. So I still actually can't 100% answer that. I know all of the ultimates do have iframes, but I'm not sure if the grappling hook does have iframes. If it additionally does, it's even cooler. But here's the most fun to me. I'd say the Guardian ended up being the most boring for me. I like the idea of a tank, and his ult is really cool. I don't know if you knew this, but I learned today that if you hold down the ultimate that the Guardian does, for like 10 seconds, it'll like get rid of negative effects. So for example, you can fight the Deathblight dudes, and like if you ult, it gets rid of the Deathblight buildup. I did one run with him where I tried to do a guard counter build because it made sense, because I got a relic drop that apparently makes it so that every time you guard counter, you gain health, but that relic was bugged and it was losing health every time it was guard countering, so it was doomed by default.
I love the relic system. I love the relic system where you can try and make builds for your characters, and I love the fact that there are like specific relics. Wilder has a thing that if you equip it to him, when he grapples and then does a light attack, his sword will catch on fire and he'll do a cool special move. Jump up into the air, then his sword catches the fire and then gets buffed for a duration. If you have his specific relic that does that, it's like, oh, okay. Oh, it has to be a great sword though. It has to be a great sword though. So it's leaning into the characters that they're supposed to be.
I think the idea is great, but I actually have some issues with it, and that's mostly the RNG factor of it. I don't mind, like I know the upsides of it, right? Like you'll get that perfect relic or whatever, the big red one that has like 3 good things for Wilder on it. I almost wish the relics would be closer to like talismans in a way. Because what I don't want to have this reality where I'm a min-maxer, right? I'm a speedrunner, I'm a challenge runner. I want to be optimal, but I don't want to do 100 hours of Nightreign until I have the perfect Wilder relic setup. You know what I mean? Like there's some games where there's this artifact farming thing where every day you log on and you farm and hopefully you get the perfect artifact, but you probably won't get it yet, maybe next time. Especially if it's like really like what you just said, that's like almost build defining. If you want to do like a fire Wilder build, you need a relic that has that, and if it takes you like 50 runs to get it, I just don't know. I love the relic system, but I don't like the randomness of it. I know it's part of the idea of a rogue, like random. But maybe eventually, and we don't know if this is going to be only a network test thing, it would be cool if certain relics unlock from certain conditions, like this good Wilder relic gets dropped if you beat every Night Lord with him, or like this Night Lord 3 times or whatever. That's my only concern. My only concern is just that first of all, you're going to get a bunch of useless relics. I guess they're not useless because you can eventually probably sell them for this merc thing that you can then use to get like a cosmetic or whatever. But yeah, I just don't want to farm 50 hours for the perfect relic setup. But I like the idea of them existing and the meta progression aspect of them.
Well, so the thing for me is, I think that this is only going to be a problem if you take psychic damage at the idea of not having an optimal min-max thing. And for me, it's not going to bother me at all, because I'm sure I'll be able to clear the hardest stuff even if I don't have it min-maxed. And it matters more to me that I have that specific move because it's cool and it's Wilder's move. And even if every other thing on that relic is trash, I'm still going to bring that with me. So like for me, it doesn't bother me at all. I like that there's an RNG element to it, that I'll play the Duchess and then she'll give me something really cool for the bow guy. And then it's well, now I have something really cool for the bow guy. Let me set him up so the next time I play with him and do his storyline, it's, he's more prepped, he's more ready to be into a build, and it kind of lets you spec into builds because like this does more bleed damage, this does more bleed damage, so you have the Duchess spec'd out to be a bleed character if you wanted to, and so when you go into the map, okay, I want a bleed weapon, let me go grab bleed weapons and try and limit, because I'm already naturally inclined to be a bleed build from my relics. I should also try and make the map work in that favor to get the things that 20% extra damage when a bleed gets procced, and all those things.
Yeah, no, I definitely see those upsides. At the same time, I remember I got like 2 red relics that were buffing lightning damage, and then I wanted to, let's do a lightning wilder build, but didn't get a single lightning thing, dropped my whole run, and obviously that can be frustrating sometimes. And I just think it needs some fine tuning. Like, it's definitely, this is not the final version, I can almost guarantee, because I got like a blue one that had like an effect for the Duchess, but the Duchess can't actually equip blue ones. I think there's still going to be some fine-tuning with them. I don't think this is the final version that gets shipped, but the idea I like, especially if it gets tuned the right way. But we'll see.
All right. Well, again, since I'm complaining about things that I can't know about, the only other thing that I'm slightly concerned about is the story. It's not even concerned about it. I'm just kind of in a situation where I would like to know more about what's going on in the story of the game, because I'm not expecting it to have anything to do with Elden Ring. I'm not expecting it to affect Elden Ring lore at all. But I am expecting it to have a good story, or at least a passable story. I need it. I'm a story-oriented person, even in games that focus mostly on gameplay. I need it to be good. I need it to be at least okay. And so I've compared this to Hyrule Warriors before, where in Hyrule Warriors you play with a new Link and Zelda, but then time shenanigans happen, and they're grabbing people from different worlds. That you have Zant from Zant Twilight Princess, you have Girahim from Skyward Sword, and you have Princess Ruto from Ocarina of Time, and they're all mixed together, and it's cute and it's fan servicey, but it does have a story. It has a story of that world, and that story doesn't really affect Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time and Skyward Sword, but it matters to the world that they're in. It matters to Hyrule Warrior what's going on. Even if it's not like, super serious. I don't need it to be serious. You don't have to have a serious story for it to be a good story. And so with Nightreign, I feel like it has a responsibility to be good because it's bearing Elden Ring's name. I really like Elden Ring. Even if I don't fully understand the story, I think it's a profound game, and it should carry itself with some dignity. It should. I'm hoping that they realize they better have a good story. I need a justification for why a lot of this stuff is happening. Even if it doesn't make sense in Elden Ring's lore, it needs to make sense in its own lore, That's basically my thing. At this point forward, I just really need some more story information. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I don't know if I can relieve you as much as with the randomization aspect there, because I really have no idea how much story is gonna play a role, because it seems like it is obviously a very, very gameplay-driven game. And I would actually not, like right now, I would not recommend Nightreign to people who just like Elden Ring, because I think Elden Ring has so much more to offer than fighting cool enemies. Like, for example, my girlfriend is obviously, she's not super into like the hard parts of Elden Ring, but she's like really into the architecture and the lore. And like for people like that, I almost wish sometimes that you could just, and you can probably set that up by like doing some settings or like installing some mods where you can just like explore the world, learn about the story, look at the pretty like vistas and stuff. And I don't know if those people are necessarily, or I'm pretty sure those people will be eating good when it comes to Nightreign, because it is just a gameplay-driven game, and to an extent even hardcore. I was thinking about this today. You get dropped in there, and if you don't know how to play Elden Ring, like if you don't know the combat mechanics of Elden Ring, you're screwed.
You're screwed. You have to.
You're level 1. Yeah. You're level 1, you get 1 hit. Like you get 1 or 2 hits.
Yeah.
So from that regard, it seems like they're really going all in to like these are going to be Elden Ring players that like the combats, or like Monster Hunter players, like people that like difficult combat challenges. And we're going to offer them like this like cooking pot of cool gameplay loops. Like I said, I do think there's going to be, it seems like there's going to be some story elements in it. There's like lots of voice acting in the trailer that we haven't really heard in the network test.
And the trailer carries itself with the kind of dignity that I'm talking about.
Yes, yeah.
It carries itself with the same kind of gravitas that the original Elden Ring trailers do. So that trailer gives me hope that they are kind of taking the story seriously. It's not just an aside.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a, right now, again, it's difficult, like you said, because maybe the roundtable hold looks different in the final release. But right now there's the station where you can change your character. And you can also change your character in the training ground. And you have to pick your character before you go into the expedition anyway. So it seems like there is some need for you to change your character, for things to change in the roundtable, to maybe learn stuff, talk about stuff. So I would like some story there, but it's, to me, at least pretty obvious that it's definitely not a pillar. And I would even say, even the Warrior games, even though it's not the core of the game, the story is not the core of the game, it might even be less than those. But I hope I'm wrong, and there's still, like you said, a satisfying story, because I can already, like you said, I can already feel a connection to those characters, because that's the one thing that stays consistent, right? Like, you'll have those wacky builds, like someday your Wilder will be using Comet Azure, and the other time he's going to be a claw-wielding bleed build, but it's still Wilder. And I know they named them in a way, like, I'm actually still not sure. I don't think this guy is called Wilder. I think he is a Wilder, because the other one are like, it's a Guardian and a Duchess and a Recluse. These are like descriptions.
I see.
More so than actual names, right? But I still have the connection, like Wilder, like you said, he's my boy as well. And I would like to know why he's here, and I would like to know what his motivations are. And they are clearly like some form of, like, they have some sort of background. Like the Guardian guy has his wings like clipped, and is he related? Okay, yeah. Like I said, I also believe it's not going to be specifically related to the events of Elden Ring. Like, they might not have anything to do with Stormvale Castle.
I mean, he does seem to be a Stormhawk-looking guy. He does. He does. He's got Stormhawk powers. He does the big wing flip to stagger things around him.
Essentially, I'm hoping that we get some satisfying answers there, and some maybe some story arcs to the characters, and maybe like it's much cooler as well. Okay, what I at least want, in my opinion, is lore for the Night Lords. Even if it's not related to Elden Ring, but I want it, like what I just talked about with Radahn in the DLC, is it makes you feel like, not only from the difficulty, but setup, it makes you feel like you're fighting a god. The final boss, the current Night Lord you can fight, is pretty cool, but I have no clue what that is, right? It's just a dog that holds a sword, and you don't need to do that much work to make that like a little bit of a bigger deal, and give them some backstory, and make you more invested in like taking down this Night Lord. Like, why is that such a scary foe, and like what's their deal? I would like that at least.
Do you think that all of the Night Lords are going to be unique bosses, unique to Nightreign, or do you think that they'll take do you take at least some of them will be previous bosses from Dark Souls?
Yeah, I was thinking about this today, because we also talked about Godwin just then. Obviously, it is a chance for them, if there's no Elden Ring 2 or no other Elden Ring DLC or whatever, to put in something that's like a missing piece, like a Glow Might Queen reference. It doesn't have to specifically connect to Elden Ring, and it doesn't have to be even called like Godwin or whatever. But they could give us some answers in that regard. I do think they're definitely all going to be unique fights. I think all of them are going to have some sort of like 3-player mechanic, just like the splitting up of the dog, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I also thought today about the fact that there's these buffs in the game, right? When you like finish one of the night bosses, not the Night Lords, there's buffs in the game, like you do 20% extra damage to dragons, or you do 20% damage to those who live in death. And the reason I thought this was interesting is these buffs seem pretty useless, because there's like 2 dragons on the map, and obviously this version of the map, But even if this was a later version, it seems like a waste to take a buff that's this important or like this big of a deal for just fighting like a mini boss, because you could just choose to fight a different mini boss.
Or you just power through the regular mini boss and still kill it.
Oh, exactly. Without the buff. As of right now, you have to queue up for the night boss you want to do, the Night Lord you want to do. So I was wondering if those, again, this is early network test, but maybe those are like hints towards what some of the Night Lords will be like. Maybe there's a Dragon Night Lord, which is why that buff is in place, and maybe there's an Undead Night Lord, because that's really the only reason you would take a buff slot, because if the Night Lord is difficult and it's of that type. But I have no clue, and that's also the sort of thing that I don't. It's always hard, right? Like I know you know the feeling, like the week before the game comes out, and maybe there's a new preview, and you kind of want to go into the Night Lords blind, but you have to cover them because everyone is putting out content on them. But I would like to be blind on the rest of them if I can, because I think those will be the highlights, especially if they have a cool like story setup as well.
I do hope they don't spoil them all, basically. But I'm right now for this game in particular, I'm ravenous for more information. Like even if I wanted to go in blind, I even if I wasn't a YouTuber, I wouldn't be able to resist. I need more information on this thing.
and it's different as well, because the first quote unquote playthrough on it is not going to be as important as it is for something like Shadow of the Erdtree, because your favorite moments will be like that one run where you were the only one alive, 2 friends, and you still took down the Night Lord, or you had like this really broken build where you one-shot this one Night Lord. I think the gameplay is more important there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also curious. Okay, so here's the thing that a little bit bothersome. They don't tell you how things work. So you don't know your stats. Like you don't know.
True.
You don't know how much dexterity or strength Wilder has, and I'm assuming he's a quality character. He's strength dex character. He seems to be a jack of all trades character. But let's say you have a fire weapon. Does fire still, is it strength based, or is it like the other kind of fire that's faith based? What's Wilder's faith?
Yeah. I know what you're saying. It's obvious why they didn't do it this way with the leveling up this time, right? Like every character has this baseline of stats, and they level up differently depending on who you pick. Like the Recluse gets more FP per level, and the Guardian gets more Vigor per level. I don't actually exactly know if that's going to be that big of a deal, though, because I don't know if you have to min-max to that extent. You always see like your damage number when you pick up a new sword, and the other things that are, to me, this was my strat in general. Those passive buffs that you get from just like having stuff in your inventory seem to matter much more than any stat could ever do. Like I would usually just get 6 random weapons to already feel strong, and then slowly switch out the ones that would fit my builds. But just stacking up, like you get like 2 random weapons that buff your charge attacks by 15%. Suddenly, your level 1 weapon charge attack would already be really strong. And it's definitely probably going to require a little bit of a shift of thinking. Like instead of thinking about scaling now and what do I do there, there's going to be other things that are going to be important. That being said, I do wonder if there is. Again, this game seems pretty hardcore to me, which doesn't matter to me because I like it. But had I not watched, like I was watching Lobos's 2-hour early preview on the game where he was explaining all of these things, I would have never really known about them. But maybe there's some other, maybe they teach you when the game actually fully comes out.
Okay, well, you've exhausted my list of things I wanted to talk about. So unless you had something else, I think that would be it.
No, I'm just going over my list here as well. Actually, one thing that I would like your experience on is the circle itself coming in, which I only then found out is literally, like, it's not just rain with a G, but it's also raining outside the circle.
Yeah.
And the rain is coming in. But obviously, from a design perspective, it gives that constant pressure happening. But to me, the circle was like not that scary. Like oftentimes, I would actually stay outside the circle and still get something done. because the damage was, while it was happening, it was like happening pretty slow.
Yeah.
And you could usually stay out and like heal against it, especially if you have like 5 flasks. Did you like the circle overall? Do you think it was too? Did you think
it's way too lenient? It's way too lenient.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think it needs to be way more severe, or to quickly ramp up. So like maybe it starts off for like for the first 30 seconds, it's how it is now, but then if you keep being in there, it'll just ramp up in intensity. So the next 10 seconds are as bad as the first 30, and the next 10 are as bad as the first 40 put together. Like to the point that you just can't out heal it. Yeah, that circle needs to be more impactful.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing, because I didn't get to talk about her, I don't think you played her. From what I gathered, is that I felt like the Duchess was way too strong. The invisibility is like completely overpowered.
Yeah,
because I know invisibility is it's in Elden Ring you get like noticed a little bit less, but that's not the case here. Like they just don't know where you are. Like I was fighting bosses that would hit walls while I was fighting them, and at the same time, whenever your ult is up, you can just like go in with revive both of your teammates and just keep playing, get your ultimate again. I feel like with like the right amount of skill, that character seems way too strong. But way too strong.
It also has like the bosses wouldn't even you'd waste no stamina, because you wouldn't be considered in battle even as you're fighting the bosses, because at least until the invisible thing goes away, it's very strong. Another thing that's too strong is bleed. Holy shit! Bleed.
Oh my god, the hook claws.
Yeah,
the hook claws in particular. And I hate that as well, because I was thinking, I remember before the DLC came out, I was like, oh, I hope they make Holy stronger. Holy was like pretty bad in the base game, and they did, but like the most OP things from the base game, Bleed and Frost, were still the most OP things in the DLC, and they once again seem to be the most OP things there, because the more tanky enemies get, the better like percentage damage becomes. Yeah, I hope that they tune that a little bit. And then I was also thinking from a different perspective, what is interesting is that I thought some things that are pretty bad in Elden Ring have a lot more potential here, especially bows. Because like one of the downside of bows in Elden Ring is how vulnerable you are. So people usually only play bows of like they jump bow attacks so they can still roll. But suddenly you have like actual people being able to tank the boss. You don't have ammunition, like you have infinite shots. And one thing I found out only on the last day is that you can grease your bow. So you don't need like specific elements. You can blood grease your bow and every shot does bleed. Or you can like magic grease your bow and every shot does magic. So I'm very interested in the archer. I want it to be viable, not OP obviously, but it's like just not even viable in normal Elden Ring. So it would be cool to explore the playstyle a bit.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Well, I guess the last thing would be the deflecting guy.
Right.
I really want to use that deflecting guy. I want to see how it's going to work exactly. How is his power? Is it a passive thing? Is it an active thing? Is it on cooldown? How are the deflecting going to work? Give it to me. Just hand it on over. I need it.
Yeah, I really hope it's actually the guy. Like, I feel like most people expect it to be the guy because the samurai is using it. I hope it's not that the tier is like in the game as a one-time consumable and you get to use it for like one fight.
No,
but then you can actually like
that can't be
the guy,
it.
And it's like
it's the guy. It's got to be the guy.
I hope it's his passive. Like everyone has a passive, so that guy's passive might just be if you block with your weapon and it's perfectly timed, you can like extra guard counter and it doesn't lose you stamina. Basically, what the tier does was on the passive. That's my wish too, because I just like most people enjoy good parry gameplay a la Sekiro. But that's pretty much my thoughts as well. I had a blast. I trust From Software. They still haven't let me down. But the final version will be much more random and our concerns will be addressed. And I think...
One more thing. I just thought of the last thing I should ask you about. Are you bothered by the DLC that they're selling?
I was going to say that. I was going to say exactly that thing. I think. Oh, I have another question that goes with that actually. I think it's strange, and it seems very much like a Bandai Namco forced thing where they knew that that's something they have plans for. Like eventually, they want more characters and bosses to be introduced. And Bandai Namco, I don't know. I don't know how much you followed this, but wasn't there like a scenario where Bandai Namco like lost their rights to Elden Ring or something?
Yeah, From Software owns all of Elden Ring now.
Right, which is why I thought like maybe this was like the last of their like it's gonna they won't be able to make the same decisions soon anymore, so they want to announce the DLC now to drive extra sales or whatever. It seems weird. I'm not concerned about it because as of right now, I believe that everything that From Software is putting out, and this network test reaffirmed that, is seemingly good quality. It just seems strange. It seemed like a non-From Software thing, but it doesn't really concern me. One thing that I was thinking about again today is I know there's been these rumors about like the Elden Ring mobile game or whatever, right? And the thing that makes me curious about that is, do you think this was ever gonna be that? Because why are the ability and the ultimate icon these like in the middle of the screen,
like you could just push them on the phone? Yeah.
Yeah, and then the map as well. Like the way the map shows up and you can scroll it with the stick seems like that's something you could do on a touch screen. I was just like curious about it, if that ever was that thing. Or if maybe someone saw Nightreign and because of that thought it was a mobile game. I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm not concerned. I wasn't concerned before, and I'm less concerned even now. And I'm looking forward to the game.
The way I feel about it is I'm very willing to give From Software all the leniency in the world until they do something I don't like.
Yeah.
And they still haven't done anything I don't like. Nightreign isn't out. If Nightreign comes out and it's a total disappointment, there's not enough procedural generation. Things are very static. Limgrave is everywhere. There's no other maps. It's only Limgrave all the way down. Then I'll be cautious going forward. But like
that makes sense.
I'm not going to be cautious when From Software has consistently put out only things that I adore, like not just like outright love all of them. So I'll start getting worried once my hand has been burned on the stove. Not yet. Right at the moment, I'm just opening the wallet. Just give me the deluxe edition. I don't care. I'll pay Piggy. If you make 30 more DLCs and make this a live service game, I'll still pay for it if I end up liking it.
No, I agree. Like if might as well make the deal on the DLC now. And if I then realize, let me down, the 4 classes are underbaked, and there's like one new Night Lord, and this felt like a Bandai Namco pushed like thing, and it wasn't fun, then maybe the next one I won't get early and actually look at it first. But right now I think there's no reason to be concerned as long as you like what you're seeing. I like what I'm seeing.
Yep, that's basically how I feel.
Cool. That's pretty much my points. I think we got to talk about like the last year of game developments, at least that concern the both of us. Mostly Elden Ring and Zelda focus. I know for you specifically, there's also a Monster Hunter game on the horizon that I'll definitely play, but I've never been like really into it. I played like the main campaign of World, but still gonna be checking out Wilds.
Okay, I hope you enjoy it. I'm looking forward to it. It's probably not worthwhile getting into Monster Hunter Wilds here. But I do have some concerns on that one as well. But it's not valuable to get into it right before. I'll complain about it when it comes out if there are things to complain about.
Makes sense. Well, it was fun catching up on that regard.
Yep. Thank you for coming. This has been the Yggdrasil podcast. Thank you all very much for listening. Goodbye, Limcube.